Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Art Escape, another virtual tour through Asia. My name is Nicole, and I will be your moderator for today's event. Before we get started, as everybody's signing in and getting settled down, I'm just going to go over a couple of things first. This is our schedule for today's program. We're going to go through a brief greeting and introduction, go over a couple of things. I'll introduce you to Joanna, who will be our special guest for tonight. So after the greetings and introduction, we'll play the video. Tonight's video is about 13 minutes long, so we'll have a lot of time for the question and answer afterwards. So get your questions ready. And then the question and answer portion will take up about like 25 to 30 minutes, just kind of depending on how active everybody is into the Q&A. So before we get started, we always want to do a land acknowledgement for the land that the Asian Art Museum is on. We would like to acknowledge that the land in which we are gathered is the ancestral home of the Ohlone peoples who stewarded this land for generations. We pay respect to the elders past, present, and emerging, for they hold the memories, traditions, and culture of the people across the nation. We extend our respect to the Ohlone Ramaytush, Coastal Miwok, as well as other Indigenous people who are present. So I'm going to introduce you to a couple of features. If this isn't your first Art Escape, you've probably seen these before, but if it is, I just wanted to get a couple of rules straight first. So you will see at the bottom of your screen, there are two different options. You can pop something into the chat, or you can pop something into the Q&A. Similar, but very different in their functionality. The chat can be seen by everybody. And so if you wanted to chat with each other, bounce around ideas, comment on what you're seeing in the video, and you want others to see what you're saying, pop it into the chat. That's kind of like our little instant message area for all of the viewers. The Q&A is different. Now for the Q&A, that is where you will post all of your questions that you would like Joanna to answer tonight. Keep in mind that others cannot see the Q&A, just the panelists, myself, Joanna, and all of the people that are helping us out on the back end tonight. So that'll be seen only by the panelists. Let's test this out. So pop into the chat, again, the chat, so that we can all see each other's answers. If you could choose anyone in history to grab dinner with, who would it be? The state of California is starting to reopen more. And so we finally go out to restaurants. I'm so excited. I've missed restaurants so much over the past year. Or maybe you just want this historical figure to just hang out at your house, sit by the fireplace, just catch up, pick their brain. Who do you want to talk to? So let's see. Eleanor Roosevelt would have been my fit too. That's great. William James, Harriet Tubman, Einstein, Jesus Christ. Yeah, that would have been a really interesting one. Henry Miller, Winston Churchill. Oh man, that would have been a great dinner party if we could just get everybody together. Great. Well, everybody continue popping your answers into the chat. I'd love to see the historical figure that you would like to chat with. Genghis Khan, very interesting. All right. And then there's a few new things going on. We're now open. How exciting is that? This pandemic is finally starting to feel like it's turning in the right direction, and the Asian Art Museum was able to reopen its doors last month. We opened on the 4th, and right now our hours are a little different. We're open on Thursdays in the afternoon and the evening, and then Friday through Monday, 10 to 5. Time tickets are available on the website. We highly recommend that you get time tickets ahead of time. We do have set capacity here because of the COVID-19 regulations that are set forth by the city. And so if you want priority entry, go get your tickets online. We also have free days on the first Sunday of every month. And there is so much new stuff at the Asian Art Museum. We have a wealth of contemporary art that has been installed while the pandemic was still raging outside our doors. And so we have the new Wilbur Gallery, the new Art Terrace, all of those installations are starting to go up. There is so much new stuff to see at the Asian Art Museum. And even if you're not interested in contemporary art, we've had a lot of collections rotations. And so there is so much new stuff to see inside of our galleries. And who am I? My name's Nicole. We probably have met before. If this isn't your first Art Escape, you've probably seen my face. You might have seen me around the museum. I'm the manager of guest experience and group sales. So I oversee the ticketing department, the information desk and coach check, private tours. I know a lot of you docents. I see a lot of familiar names out there right now in the participant list. And we also oversee the accessibility resources. So wheelchairs, those take a seat stools, magnifying glasses to help you see those labels a little bit easier when you're inside the galleries. That's all us. That's all stuff that the guest experience department can help you with. And tonight's special guest is Joanna Lee, the curatorial assistant for Chinese art. Joanna started at the Asian Art Museum, and she has provided a lot of research on a variety of our exhibitions. The Bold Brush at Ohonyen, Zhang Daishen's Painting from Heart to Hand, two of my favorite exhibitions that we've had here, and the upcoming Lost Kingdoms of Ancient China. She is currently curating the exhibition Seeing Gender that looks at our collection and the representations of gender that have varied over time from culture to culture. She studied history of art and architecture at Brown University and has worked in research positions at a variety of places, including the J. Paul Getty Museum. So welcome, Joanna, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks so much, Nicole, for the introduction. Once again, I'm the curatorial assistant for Chinese art at the Asian Art Museum. And before we begin, I actually wanted to start by acknowledging the recent surge of racist attacks and violence against our AAPI community. We stand in solidarity with our AAPI community in the SF Bay Area in the US and are working to make the museum a safe place for all of our communities. The city is actually sponsoring a campaign next Saturday, April 17th at Civic Center Plaza, to stand up against anti-Asian hate. And the museum is donating free museum passes to the 1,000 solidarity bags that are being put together. This outdoor unit event will feature healing spaces, family-friendly activities, and a volunteer opportunity to assemble and deliver the solidarity kits to our neighbors. So for those who are interested, I believe there is info in the chat that Nicole just put down there. I also wanted to acknowledge the colleagues who made this virtual Art Escapes program possible. A huge thank you to Nicole, Sarah, Scott, Michael, and John, who are behind the scenes of every event, who put so much thought and effort into every detail and make it so seamless, even when everything doesn't go according to plan. And a huge shout out to Mira for editing and recording and making all of us look so good and professional always. And Steve also followed each of us to film and make this recording. And thank you to Zach and the communications team who spearheaded and executed this effort flawlessly. There's a lot of work that goes into putting this series together, and it wouldn't have been possible without everyone involved. And thank you everyone so much for those of you who could make it to today's tour. I hope you enjoy the tour of the Loggia.
Avi, you can start the video. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joanna Lee, the curatorial assistant for Chinese art at the Asian Art Museum. I'll be giving you a tour of the Chinese ceramics in the Loggia. The Asian Art Museum has one of the best collections in the country, and they are displayed beautifully in our light-filled Loggia space. This is actually one of my favorite places in the museum, which I think many people tend to miss during their visit. This building used to be the San Francisco Library, but when the Asian Art Museum moved from the Golden Gate Park to this building in Civic Center, it was redesigned into a museum. Gay Alenti, who is best known for a redesign of the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, was the architect for the renovation of this Beaux-Arts architectural building. While transforming the space from a static design of a library to a dynamic museum, she created spaces with natural daylight for better visitor orientation and perception of the artworks. There actually used to be painted murals on the walls in these loggia niches as part of the old library. They were removed to bring light from the skylights, and cases were added inside each niche, which now stores the museum's collection of Chinese ceramics. Ceramic objects are able to be displayed in this space because they are less sensitive to light than most objects in our collection. There are 12 cases in the loggia, and the ceramics span from the Song Dynasty to modern times. They are organized by ceramic styles and technique, types of ware, and kiln locations. During the 9th and 10th centuries, as international trade prospered, Chinese ceramics traveled far and wide, reaching new boundaries by sea and land, even as far as the east coast of Africa. The manufacture of Chinese ceramics was bustling, which allowed for new techniques, as well as the mastery of the skill and craft. By the 11th century, the Song court established official kilns, and their systems and products were highly esteemed and reproduced after, setting the standard for all official wares in the later periods. One of the 5 great kilns of the Song Dynasty was Junware, which were primarily made at the kilns in Yuxian in Henan province in northeastern China. These kilns were admired for their radiant purple and blue glazes, and this case showcases the Junwares that have been produced from the northern Song to the Jin and Yuan dynasty. Song Dynasty ceramics were known for their brilliant feldspathic glazes and their simplicity of form. Prized for their unadorned glaze and shape, the best quality wares became the monopoly of the Song court, while the rest supplied the commercial market. Jun wares were known for their innovative use of copper oxide to yield the color purple. A popular glaze for Junwares was robin's egg blue with splashes of copper red pigment that produces purple tones. Variations of flower pots constitute the majority of Junware. This flower pot with 5 circular drainage holes is among the best works produced by the imperial workshops at Yuxian. Its elegant shape, body, and glaze are attributes of the Jun official production in the early 12th century, and there are a few other examples of this type of flower pot at the Palace Museum in Beijing and at the Taipei Palace Museum. There is a number mark at the bottom of this flower pot that indicates that these wares were used in the private quarters of the imperial palace. It is marked with the Chinese numeral 2, which was incised or stamped into the clay before it was fired. Numbered vessels were originally intended to hold flowers or plants, but by the 18th century, they were collected as art objects and used as decorative pieces in the inner courts of Beijing's Forbidden City. During the Mongol-ruled Yuan dynasty, the porcelain kilns at Jingdezhen in Jiangxi province came to the forefront as a center of porcelain production, and the manufacture of the famed blue and white porcelain came to maturity. Subject matters were more complex and rich as a result. Here's a vase with a scene of scholars going to a gathering depicting a gentleman with a servant holding a chin. It is a Ming Dynasty example of blue and white porcelain ware from the Tianshun period. Potters mastered underglaze painting in cobalt blue, a metal oxide that yields vibrant colors at high temperature. To apply the underglaze design, cobalt blue pigments were painted on the porcelain's white clay body, and the cobalt turned blue upon firing. In the glazing process, a clear glaze is applied on top to produce a non-toxic decoration that does not fade. The technique of underglaze painting is a 3rd century innovation originating from Zhejiang province in southeastern China, and the use of cobalt reflected the influence of the Islamic world, as cobalt ores were imported from Persia during the Tang Dynasty. During the Ming Dynasty, porcelain replaced stoneware as the common medium, and polychrome decoration became widely employed. The ceramics industry at Jingdezhen expanded color palettes and experimented with other tones. Porcelain wares with multicolor decoration reached a height of artistic and technical achievement during the Ming Dynasty. This jar with the design of lions playing with a ball is a great example of Middle Ming wares. It shows a balanced application of underglaze blue and overglaze red and green. The polychrome scheme required 2 firings, one for the porcelain body and blue underglaze, and a second for the red and green overglaze decoration. At the shoulder of the vase, there are 8 barbed openings with 8 Buddhist symbols inside them, which was a common decorative motif from the late 15th to the early 16th century. On the lower band of the vase, there is a lotus squirrel, which was often seen in earlier Ming pieces. In the central band, lions are depicted playing with coin-patterned multifaceted balls. This imagery was popular during the Hongzhi Zhengde period, and the piece displays refined strength in both design and colors. The Qing dynasty is particularly noted for the production of color glazes, and there was mastery in many ceramic types, including blue and white wares, polychrome wares, and monochrome wares. During the late 1600s, porcelain pieces in the imperial workshop were decorated with colorful enamel formulas that were imported from Europe. By the early 1700s, the Chinese had developed formulas for new colors, which they applied to glazed porcelain pieces from Jingdezhen of southeastern China. These exquisite bowls are a pair, and they revive the 100-flower ground motif once made by the Jiaqing imperial shop. The surface of the bowl is completely covered in a profusion of flowers in full bloom. Identifiable flowers include peonies, lotus, chrysanthemums, magnolias, peaches, yellow hibiscus, apricots, morning glory, rose camellia, daylilies, narcissus, and wisteria. The enamels were fired to a proper lustrous quality in even layers. The color tonality, dominated by lightly shaded yellow, green, and blue, creates a tender subtlety. This luxurious design symbolizes a wish for the Qing Empire to last as long as flowers grow in the world. The auspicious motif of 100 flowers imply that blessings extend over the entire empire. Monochrome wares, or single color glazing, is a fascinating technique where each formula has a rich cultural history and a name with complex associations. During the Qing dynasty, monochrome wares were esteemed for their technical accomplishment and brilliant colors, and many Song dynasty monochrome wares were reproduced during this time. This bowl is an example of famille rose, which translates to rose family in French. These types of porcelain wares were overglazed in opaque colors, mainly in shades of pink and carmine. This low-fire glaze was a successful adoption of a Western enamel during the late Kangxi period and was frequently used during the Yongzheng Qianlong era. These colors were known as yangcai, which means foreign colors in Chinese, because they were introduced from Europe. During the reign of the Yongzheng Emperor in the Qing dynasty, pottery with these shades of famille rose colors became very popular. A delicate blowing process was used to superimpose the colors onto a white porcelain body. The rose-red glaze was evenly blowed on the exterior, and the interior was left in white glaze. Because of the high cost of the enamel material, shapes with rose-red glaze were usually small cups, saucers, and plates. Lastly, one of my favorite ceramic pieces in the loggia is this teapot in the shape of a tea crate and stool by artist Zhou Dingfang, who is a third-generation Yixing potter. It is a fairly modern piece created in the 1990s and is whimsical and very meta. The geometric square-shaped teapot is in the shape of a tea crate and stool. However, as you look closely, you'll see that the teapot that sits on top of the crate, which is the lid of the teapot, is in the shape of the actual teapot and vessel. This teapot was made by using slabs of clay, and all Yixing teapots were handmade, as opposed to being thrown on the wheel. Yixing ware refers to the pottery made in Yixing, which is located in southern Jiangsu province. The clay of Yixing is known as zixia, which literally translates as purple sand, and the type of colors range from beige to light brown, cinnabar red to purplish brown, and dark green to black. Yixing ceramics are known to enhance the color, fragrance, and taste of tea, and as a result, the majority of Yixing ware is in the form of tea sets. And that's a brief potted tour of the Chinese ceramics at the Asian Art Museum's Loggia. When you visit the museum, be sure to go up the stairs and stop by the Loggia.
All right. Thank you, Joanna. I agree. The Loggia is very much one of my favorite parts of the museum as well. And not everybody sees it. It's kind of easy to miss. The artwork behind me is in the Loggia. I'm not in the Loggia right now. All right. And we started to have a good amount of questions popped into the Q&A. And so if you have a question, please jot it down. That way we can start chipping away at these. So somebody asked, why are certain pigments like the blue and the purple so special? You mentioned that there was a reason behind indigo, but just the blue and the purple pigments in the beginning of the artiscape, why were those so special?
So I referred to those glazes, the robin's blue and the purple copper, related to the junwares. And junwares are a high-fired stoneware, stonewares with high-fire glazes. And I guess why, in terms of the pigments were special, is that the purples came from copper and iron metal in the glazes. And this was a huge invention in terms of creating these colors. And even ceramic potters today still haven't figured out how to create those exact colors in modern kilns. They were created with very specific formulas with very specific kiln conditions. And so, yeah, so in terms of the color, it's the copper and the iron metal that were in the glazes.
Would help if I unmute myself. And then Fred asked, were the 100 flowers all endemic to China, or were types of flowers selected for pieces for where pieces were exported?
I'm wondering, do you mean like if that was a motif specific to China, or if it was, or types of flowers? Yeah, I mean, there's so many like hidden meanings and motifs that have special meanings, but in terms of if they were also for pieces exported to China, I think they were motifs definitely like important in China, and they were either used in China but also exported as well.
And then kind of looping back to what you were discussing before regarding the glazes. When you say the glaze was blown, what technique does that refer to?
Yeah, I guess I meant by that. And so I don't know if people are familiar with ceramic production today, but so I actually am also a ceramicist, but so in current studios, there will be like a spray booth where maybe with modern technology, there's like a kind of like a vessel or some sort of like a holder where you can spray the glazes, but I guess in terms of like it was an earlier version of spraying the glazes. So there would be some sort of like a jar or tube, and it's kind of like a straw type of thing where you would use your mouth to physically blow the glazes onto the clay body, so that just for even thickness and glaze consistency. So it's like a very early version of the modern technology of the spray booth.
And since you're a ceramicist, this is a good question from Rob. What is the ceramics making and firing process like? And how is that different today than it was before?
Yeah, so I would say it's very extensive in terms of the ceramic making process. First, you start off with the raw materials that are gathered and crushed, and they're mixed and then cleaned. And after that process of making the clay with the raw materials and minerals, the clay is shaped and formed either by hand or on the wheel. And then there can be patterns or shapes that can be made on the clay while it is soft, such as carving or incising patterns on it. And also during the stage, you can paint with slip or underglaze. And once the clay is dried, dried slowly, first to leather hard consistency, and then till it is bone dry, then it goes to the first firing. So the bisque firing is the first firing that makes the vessel clay much harder and stronger, but it's still not at its hardest and strongest state. After the first firing, the piece is glazed for the final firing. And there's so many processes and steps into ceramic making that there's so many areas where in which things can go wrong, whether it be something in the kilns or glazes, reacting, and so definitely for the royal kilns, like even if there was like one small defect, it would be destroyed. And so that's why there was a huge production, and there's so many artisans whose job was just to know like how to do each little step and for the whole process.
Sounds very complex. And do you know if any famous kilns that made these ceramics still exist today and produce ceramics?
Yeah, definitely. It's there's the most famous one, Jingdezhen, that's is still like very vibrant in ceramic production today. So Jingdezhen is famous it's known as the porcelain capital of China in Jiangxi province. And it got its name through the Emperor Jingde of the Song dynasty because of the blue and white porcelain that was produced for the emperor. And during the Ming dynasty, the imperial court designated a kiln at Jingdezhen as the official kiln to produce the ceramics required by the palace. And so right, as I guess currently right now today, these imperial kiln sites are heritage sites at Jingdezhen, but there's still a very vibrant ceramic production at Jingdezhen right now.
Would these be like World Heritage sites, like protected heritage sites?
Yeah, it would be for.
Okay. And then let's see. How large would the workshops be during the imperial supported period?
I guess, I mean, large in terms of people, I don't know, but, and also which period in terms of the imperial kilns, the official kilns were set up during the Song dynasty, and they were supported and established by the government. And so, yeah, I assume that it would be very large because it was production just for and kind of, established and kind of dictated by the government. But in terms of like people, I'm not sure.
Okay, and so you said that some of these kilns were by the government and then some were royal kilns. And so since some of these were made in royal kilns, how were these distributed? Were they mainly for royal use? Would they pass down to the common person like me? Or how did they kind of distribute themselves throughout society?
Could you, sorry, say that again? Sorry, didn't.
Sure. So since these items were made oftentimes in like royal kilns or government created kilns, how were the products distributed? Were they kind of focused towards royalty only, or would that make its way down to just the common person, and how just kind of the distribution of the ceramics?
Right. I mean, also I think depends on like which period you're talking about, but um, so I guess I mentioned that the official royal kilns were established by the Song Dynasty, and during that time also like there were kilns and kiln productions just for everyday use as well. And I guess why the official kilns during the Song Dynasty were so important was because um, well, also like the emperor Zhaoji was an artist himself, and he was kind of unhappy with some of the defects of the wares, and um, I guess he's produced and designed these kilns for his liking. So I guess so there concurrently there was just ceramics used for everyday use, but also like with super like high caliber and standards, those were in use by the royal kilns and the official kilns. And later in the Ming and Qing dynasties as well, there were official kilns that were set up, but the government didn't have ownership and monopoly over the production. And so this term official kiln refers to the Song dynasty.
All right. And then when cobalt pigment was first introduced, was it available for everyone, or was it reserved for the higher classes?
Yeah. So when cobalt was first traded and it was from Persia, it was very expensive and almost twice as expensive as gold. They were brought from the trade routes from Persia, and once they were applied on pottery and porcelain to make blue and whiteware that was very, very popular, it was sold and traded back to the Middle East. And I guess it was used very sparingly in the beginning, like for imperial use only. And yeah, it was so I guess, so it was used sparingly. And then the blue pigment was seen as early as the Tang Dynasty, but it wasn't until the Yuan that the blue and white porcelain gained popularity.
And are the pots ever displayed with plants in them to show their original intent? I would assume that would mean inside of the museum. We do have our Ikebana collection around here when the volunteers were able to visit, but do we ever put flowers in our ceramics here besides those ones?
In our museum, no. But I guess in terms of in general, like if they were ever displayed in their original intent, like, so I think they may be referring to just from the talk of the Junwares, how some of the pots were initially created for plants, like for potted plants and plants, but over the years as they were being collected, they were used for display. So for example, the Junwares I mentioned, like they were being collected during the Qing dynasty, and they were collected as treasured objects. And so because it's kind of like today, collectors and collections today, the more rare and valuable an object is, it's used for display as opposed to use. Like there is a function for it, but sometimes like as if like we would put an object, in our cabinets or, in the museum, that like sometimes they don't, like a lot of the dishes, for example, are not presented with food. So some similar to that idea.
And then earlier you noted that one small mistake could cause an entire batch to just be done. And so I can imagine that temperature control was really important to firing ceramics. And so what did the early ceramicists use to control firing temperatures in the imperial kilns?
So all the kilns were outdoors, and it was this very huge, kiln built with like stones and mud and dirt, but like they used wood and to create get to those temperatures. But in terms of controlling the firing temperatures, I'm not sure. I don't know. Like, I feel like it's super specific. Like, I don't know if like they had to like fan, like, or just like kind of be very watchful of it. And I know even like right now, like modern technology, modern kilns, like just even, I know we have like modern controls for electric kilns, just controlling temperatures, but still like, even though like there's a temperature written, or like, yeah, even with electric kilns, like it's really difficult to create the same type of conditions, to create the same type of piece, for something to look exactly the same, and to really control the production of it. It's even now, it's still very difficult. So like, I guess, yeah, in ancient times, like they were very good.
They did it somehow. And so for materials and colors, do you have to kind of bake them at a different temperature than others? Like, are some colors more like delicate than others? I can imagine materials definitely, but are there certain colors that you have to be more careful to when it comes to heat exposure?
Yeah, definitely. There are enamels that are fired at lower temperatures. So depending on the type of clay you're using, or whether it be stoneware and earthenware and porcelain, they all have different firing temperatures and different types of glazes. Or there's high fire glazing and then low fire glazing. And enamels were over glazes that were applied after the glaze, and oftentimes they required lower temperatures. But also enamels allowed for just more variety in colors.
All right. And then besides bowls and plant pots and all of those kind of ones that we've gone over, what other types of ceramic objects were made? Like animals, human figures? Was there like a diversity in the ceramic collections, or was it pretty consistent across region to region?
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like that's a very broad question, but yes, like ceramics is a medium that's used for sculptures, for figurines, um, for yeah, for so many sculptural things and vessels that don't necessarily need to be porcelain objects as well. So like definitely in the beginning, there like ceramics were found in burial sites and tombs, and oftentimes they were there to just to act as substitutes for bronze and lacquer objects. So yeah, so if sometimes, and because ceramics as a medium is very durable and very long lasting, so um, they are what remains from from after many years and from history. And so yeah, so in the beginning it started off as ceramics kind of mimicking bronze and lacquer objects to be placed in tombs, and they were for the taste of not the living, but for the dead. And so to accompany the dead in, whether it be, yeah, different religions, or different ideas of like just to accompany the dead. And the most famous example of ceramic work in burials is the terracotta army for the first emperor of China of the Qing dynasty. And it's, I guess, during the uh, yeah, it's ceramic production is flourished during the 17th century. That was when trade with the West and outside worlds, outside countries happened, and that's when kind of the China we know today. Like, I guess when we think of China, sometimes the West can be thought of as like this blue and white porcelain.
Great. And what are some of the oldest Chinese ceramics in history that we still have around, I suppose?
Yeah, there are some, ceramics that have been found from the Neolithic period, which is roughly around 5,000 to 1700 BC, and some of those we have in our collection galleries. And yeah, so definitely like there have been many objects that have been found um, in our galleries. And by the 16th century, most technically advanced examples in the world were produced in China. And yeah, yeah, and definitely in terms of like, there's so many ceramics in other civilizations as well, like whether it be in Egypt or Mesopotamia, in Greece, but definitely from the Neolithic period, like we have seen examples of the oldest ceramics.
Okay. And so we sometimes use the term China interchangeably with ceramics. And I'm wondering what the difference between China and ceramics is and where even the word China originated from.
Yeah, so China often is used interchangeably with the word porcelain in English. And definitely it was coined, in the West as to refer to Chinese porcelain and to refer to where it came from because, Chinese ceramics was so largely exported and exported, and just the trade that was so flourishing between the China and the West, especially in the 17th century. And definitely in terms of this, like provides, insight into the history of trade between China and Europe. Um, yeah, like I would say it was with the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama that maritime trade with the European world can be traced back to. And when he reached India by sea, this kind of set the foundations for the trade routes between Europe and the Far East, as well as just the worldwide trade of Chinese porcelain. And in the beginning, like in Europe, Chinese porcelain were seen as rare luxuries and were primarily used for display only. And by the 16th century, the Portuguese commissioned porcelain for the court. And by the 17th century, over 6 million Chinese ceramics were mass produced for trade and import to Europe. And it, like definitely during this time is, I believe, when the term China, got its name to refer to the country of where it was coming from.
Okay, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. So is porcelain originally from China, or was Chinese porcelain just seen as just so coveted that it received its own special name?
Yeah. So porcelain, yes, was from China. And um, yeah, the word, in the West, porcelain refers to the white, high fire clay that's composed of kaolin and feldspathic rock. And it's different from stoneware and earthenware, stoneware and earthenware in that it's very white and strong, but also the material allows for it to be very delicate. And in terms of, if it was from China, yes, it was invented in China, and the earliest porcelain can be referred to as primitive porcelain, and it's appeared during the Shang Dynasty, and it matured throughout, the Tang Dynasty, and then during the Song Dynasty, when the famous kilns emerged, known as the Five Great Kilns. That's when I think porcelain became more is like what we know today as porcelain, and yeah, definitely in terms of, uh, so Chinese porcelain was also exported really early on from the Han Dynasty through the Silk Roads, and it was exported in large quantities during the Song Dynasty because of the maritime trade to the West.
And then we have viewers that are just really interested in the loggia and the rotations in the loggia. So one thing I love so much about it is how much light flows into it. And you talked about it in your video about how they really wanted to capture that natural light, but oftentimes light damages artworks. And so you noted that we have ceramics in the loggia because of that. And so how often do we rotate our ceramics in the loggia? And are there certain ceramics that are much better for a light, bright environment than others?
Yeah, I will say that we don't rotate the ceramics in our loggia very often. I would say in a couple years, I would say. And that's because, and I also kind of found this out through like the transformation project that we are working on. Um, we were able to switch out a few pieces, but definitely the cases that are there at the Loja are very difficult to lift. I think they need to bring some sort of like forklift type of thing. So it requires a lot of labor in terms of our prep team. But also in terms of, yeah, exposure to light and being able to handle that. Yes, so ceramics, the medium of ceramics allows for it to, be able to handle the light exposure. However, there are certain animals that are sensitive to light over very prolonged periods of time that we need to be considerate of. But in terms of the organization and just our, rotations and how they're displayed, there's so many factors at play in the curation of the collections. What we mentioned is that architecturally, the Loja has a lot of light, and oftentimes, like, not all mediums from a conservation standpoint can afford to sit in places with so much light exposure. For example, the paintings in our collection, I believe there's like we have like an exposure rule where after they're displayed for a couple of months, they're not allowed to be showed for another 5 years. And so with ceramics, we do not have that. There are a couple other mediums that, are less, that are more able to handle the light, like, glass, stone, metal. But in terms of like thinking about the architectural space and the limitations, as well as like how many objects we have in a certain collection and what kind of stories we want to tell, I think those factors are also considered in terms of how they are displayed and curated in the spaces we have.
Great. And one of our viewers noted, or question, is it more common to see preserved pieces of decorative ceramics in museums? Do many ceramics that were more common in households survive? So is it common for just like the everyday ceramics that were used by the everyday person to survive? Or do we have like so many elaborate ceramics because those ones were preserved better?
Yeah, I mean, I think both in a sense, because ceramics, by the nature of its medium, just has lasted so long. So I think oftentimes like so a lot of the objects that we have are either, export ceramics, export porcelain, or which would have been, from everyday households, but also being traded throughout the world, or imperial ware. And so I would say both. And if anything, maybe there's probably more export ceramics out there. And, like there have been, ceramics sometimes found in shipwrecks in the bottom of the ocean, and like, oh, like, and because it's been able to withstand like those harsh circumstances.
Okay. And are the pieces in our collection, and I can imagine this being a big mixed bag of an answer, are these from archaeological findings, or are they sourced from private collectors, donations, preservers? And would pieces like the ones that were presented in today's program, would they be even expected to be found in archaeological sites today?
Yeah. I say, well, we covered a lot of history today in terms of, time span for today's, the collection. But from the Chinese ceramics that we saw today, they were from, the Song Dynasty to modern times. So I would say that it would be pretty rare to expect to find these objects in archaeological settings. But most of the objects in the Loja, the ceramics vessels, ceramic porcelain, came from the original Avery Brundage collection, as well as other collectors who have donated ceramic objects. And we don't know the extensive provenance for all these works in terms of like where the dealers, who sold these objects to Avery Brundage got it from. But many of these ceramics were either export ceramics or imperial ceramics. And in terms of, there is a tradition of collecting Chinese art of collecting in Chinese art, as well as for dynasties to refer to the past. So for example, during the Qing dynasty, there are many objects in reference to the antique vessels and antique ceramics of the Song dynasty. And so, like, for example, the Junwares that we discussed today, they were created in Song dynasty, but passed on and collected by the imperial courts of the Qing dynasty. So maybe like they found it or it was passed on, but some of those pieces would more rarely be found in archaeological settings. But if there were archaeological, objects that are ceramics, it would be, I believe, like from earlier. Like we definitely have objects in our collection, in our permanent galleries that are from tombs, like tomb figurines or tomb slabs, and things that that are ceramics.
And then, is there an easy way to distinguish between the objects that were created for the Song markets and the royal courts, or is the line kind of blurry between those two?
So kind of similar to what I had mentioned before, there were the official royal kilns that were established by the emperor, and there were other kilns that, had everyday production. And so, yes, it would be very different like then in terms of like what there were certain ones that were very, of high caliber, but I don't know if the question refers to like now, like if we can tell now, because there are many, many fakes out there and many things that are in resemblance of the Song vessels or other, other dynasties.
And then one of our viewers had a particular question about one of the kilns. Can you describe what a dragon kiln is?
I don't know the dragon kiln, unfortunately, but I can definitely look into it and and let them know if they send me that question.
Yeah, we can definitely get back to them regarding that question. And then we're just getting a lot of like technical questions, lots of questions about like glazing, underglaze, overglaze. So can you just, you went over a little bit earlier, but can you just detail out again the underglaze and the overglaze process as it applies to the blue and white ware, for example?
Yeah, so for blue and white ware, you start with the clay, and then once it dries, that's when the underglaze can be applied. And the underglaze is very different from the overglaze in that it it's a different type of consistency. It reacts differently in the kiln. It's almost like slip or like colored clay almost, that you can apply in very detailed, figures or elements or motifs are painted on at this stage. And then once that's fired, it goes to the bisque firing. And after the bisque firing, that vessel is much harder. It's still very porous to, absorb the overglaze, but it's not as hard, but it is definitely stronger than, just dry clay itself. And then at that stage is when the overglaze is applied. There's like a clear glaze that is applied. And sometimes if there were other colors that were added, that's when it would be applied afterwards, after that glaze firing. But in terms of blue and white ware, it would be this clear glaze over the details of the blue underglaze.
And then we have time for one more question, and I'm going to have it as, was each design unique or mass produced, whether that's the blue and white glazes or any of the other patterns that we discussed earlier?
Yeah, I think it depends on which objects and kiln, but to speak generally, but yes, in the kilns, all those objects were mass produced in a sense, because there's so many processes, like just steps into the ceramic production, is at so many stages, something can go wrong. And so For example, maybe there would be a shape that maybe in the official kilns that the emperor said like they want, but like if there's like one, like it came out of the glaze firing and there's like a slight defect, then that would have been destroyed. So yes, like it was mass produced because there are so many areas in which, and times, places in which it could go wrong. Yeah, but yeah, so definitely I would say like there is definitely a production to it, and that like ceramics itself was a type of technology. Like it allowed for making of art, and art to be a household item, but in a production sense, right? In the way that, as opposed to just one object. But yes, I would say they generally mostly it was mass produced. There are some objects, depending on the time, like for example, like the last piece that I mentioned by Zhou Dingfang, like that definitely isn't mass produced. Like she handcrafted that herself, and there was probably just that one. And maybe there are certain teapots that she makes that are, multiples in a series, but definitely not mass produced in the sense of, what it was in the kiln productions.
Great, thank you for that detailed answer. And then before we log off tonight, I actually have an exciting announcement for everybody. So we have been having so much fun creating all of these programs, and we've been loving all of the feedback that you've given us. Thank you so much for filling out all of those surveys and everything like that. And so we decided to have another version of Art Escapes, and I'm going to launch a poll right now. So this is a multiple choice poll. We're going to have a new edition of this called Exhibition Excursions. It goes over special exhibitions that we've had in the past, that we've had, that we have in the future, that we have right now, really focusing on those limited time special exhibitions. And we're wondering what time of day, what day of the week works best for you, because we want to make sure that we're as available as we can be for all of you. We want to make sure that we're accessible as we can be. And so please, please, please put into the poll what time works best for you. And then if multiple work for you, if all of them work for you, perfect, amazing, thank you so much. But we'd love your feedback, because we want to tailor this to make sure that it's the most available that we can make it. And so I'll just leave this up for a second. And just in general, I wanted to thank everybody today. I wanted to thank all of you viewers. I want to thank all of the members that are here. I've seen so many familiar names in the participant window, in the chat, in the Q&A pop-up. So thank you so much for all of the viewers. And if you aren't a member, I highly encourage you join, because you get all of these art escapes, you get the exhibition excursions. All of our virtual lineup is free for members. You can log on anytime. And we also have the virtual member lounge, which has additional content that is not available to the general public. But I'm going to give my thanks. So thank you so much, Joanna, for being such a wonderful guest today. Thank you, Sarah, for helping out with the Q&A on the back end. Michael, Scott, Mira, Zach, all of those people who have made this a reality, because it really does take a village. And I just wanted to thank all of you for that. And yeah, Joanna, did you have anything you want to say before we log off?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone who was able to join us today on Saturday. And just want to encourage everyone to visit the museum. The museum is now open, and make sure to stop by the Loja. Like all the objects definitely look different in person. I remember going through while I was researching and just going and seeing in person, being surprised at the size of those pieces. So definitely it's worth seeing in person. It's a beautiful space. There are many new contemporary exhibitions that are open as well.
So much fun new stuff to see. Another reason to get a membership. You can come here anytime. We have so much cool stuff that's happening over the next year. So, all right. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great weekend. And we will hopefully see you in 2 weeks for our next Art Escape. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.